All right, guys, I just want to welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here, we're doing our preview and prediction for the Week 14 Black Friday slate. This is always a great weekend in college football because you have a pretty jam-packed Friday slate before a nice Saturday one as well. We have a couple of games here, 7 to be exact, that we're going to break down across a long afternoon of college football. A lot of very important games as well. Starting with the games at noon, Oklahoma State going to Colorado on ABC. The Buffaloes coming off a disappointing performance that has pretty much almost knocked them out of Big 12 title consideration, even though they can get in with a lot of help. First order of business is to down Oklahoma State. This is a game where they are currently 16.5-point favorites. Shedeur Sanders and his passing attack, they're pretty blanketed last week against Kansas. They weren't able to generate much, and the run defense finally got significantly exposed against Devin Neal. And now you face, a great running back in Ollie Gordon, a guy that had an emerging game against Texas Tech, ran for 10 yards per carry, also had 30 yards receiving, had 3 rushing touchdowns. So Colorado certainly have to showcase the improvements we had seen throughout the majority of the year, but momentum certainly at an all-time low right now for them after giving up 331 yards rushing to Kansas. This is a team that's been capable all year long, though, with guys like B.J. Green, Nakia Hill-Green leading the way, Samuel Onkolola, Amari McNeil, and of course Chidozie Nwankwo. So this is a team I think can certainly bounce back against the run. I think their offense is certainly going to have a good game as well against a terrible Oklahoma State defense. I think with Travis Hunter being the favorite for the Heisman, they're going to look to feed him the rock as much as possible to get those stats in before the final votes will be tallied. So I think Hunter will have a big day. Oklahoma State, though, I think they'll be able to keep pace. They started a new quarterback, Mykailu Smith, against Texas Tech, 316 yards, 2 touchdowns, completed 74%. So pretty impressive numbers there for your first career start, and they have a receiving room led by a nice trio of Rashad Owens, Brennan Presley, DeJon Stribling. I think they can keep pace in this game, Nick. I think this is a pretty, large line. Oklahoma State has just been a horrendous year for them, and their defense got even worse than it was last season. I think you'll see a lot of points in this game. I see them losing by less than 17, though I think Oklahoma State will keep pace. Or do you think Colorado's just going to feast here in the season finale?
Yeah, I think Colorado has a chance to blow out this Oklahoma State team that's just been bad this year. 3-8, they've lost 5 in a row, and really, some of those games were close. Sure, the loss against BYU on the road was close. The loss against Baylor wasn't that wide of a margin, while also this most recent loss against Texas Tech wasn't too bad, only losing by 8 in that one. But blown out against TCU, blown out against Arizona State. This is a bad team for Oklahoma State. They went and switched their quarterback up. They went with Smith here, who had a good game in his first career start. 316 yards is pretty good, plus 2 touchdowns, and is not bad at all, while Ollie Gordon looked more like himself with 156 and 3 touchdowns. Good numbers there. This is a bad team, though. This is a team that's really not been playing good football at all. They've had a lot of issues this year, a lot of questions about Gundy going forward, whether or not he should still be the coach, I don't think it's necessary to pull the plug. They're 112th in the nation in rushing yards. Ollie Gordon just has not been himself this year. They're giving up 34 points per game, 118th in the nation. This is a team that just gets outscored over and over again. They can't really seem to keep up on offense, and they've struggled. Like I said, lost a bunch in a row, actually 8 in a row after starting the year off 3-0. This team has been a complete disaster this year. As for Colorado, definitely a big blow to them losing to Kansas, a game that a lot of people felt that they were going to lose. That game had upset written all over it, and Kansas got the job done, and now Colorado needs a ton of help from across the board if they want to get into the Big 12 title game and ultimately into the college football playoff, which is something that they really hope to do up there in Boulder, Colorado. The stars on this team. You know who's going to be the guys you want to watch. You know what Deion Sanders is going to bring to it. Shedeur and Hunter are going to be lighting up the scoreboard. Hunter trying to get that final approved to the committee, the voters, that is, hey, I deserve the Heisman, battling out with another player we're going to talk about shortly who's playing in this early slate as well. This team throws the ball a lot, 317 yards per game through the air, and I expect them to air it out a lot here. I have them winning, covering the spread barely. I think they'll win by about 17 to 18 points, maybe closer to 20 depending on how things shake out. But I think they're going to win this game. This is a really good team, in my opinion, that can put up a lot of points on you very quickly. They can really rough you up and make things uncomfortable. This Oklahoma State team's a bad team. I like Colorado to have a big day here, put up a ton of points, cover the spread. I like the over in this one as well. The line is pretty high at 65.5. I like the over here. I think it's going to be a high-scoring affair. Give me the Buffaloes to cover, close out, on the final game, regular season game at Folsom Field. Going to be pretty cold up there in Boulder. Like them to win this one, close it out, and then really the rest of it's going to be in the hands of other teams. Can they find their way into the Big 12 title game in the playoff? Only time will tell.
Going down at the exact same time, the guy will be trying to play catch-up here in the Heisman race. According to the odds, Ashton Gianti over 2,000 rushing yards, hit that goal, 27 touchdowns. This is a team led by Maddox Madston, who started off the year pretty well, hasn't played as good as of late, but does have 19 touchdowns and 3 picks on the year. So a nicely balanced football team. Boise State's just not been very good, and obviously teams are putting 8-9 guys in the box, so it's certainly been incredibly harder for Gianti. He's still going to get his 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. Passing attack will have to be complimentary in a matchup against Oregon State. I think this line's just too big. Boise's not been very impressive. Pulled away late against San Jose State, beat Nevada at home by only 7 as 4 scores they're favored by, and then on the road against Wyoming, a bad Wyoming team, only beat them by 4. This is just not an impressive team right now, even though they still have that one loss to Oregon by only 3 points. Oregon State, this is a team that gave Ben Gulbranson the keys back to the offense. Had a very good game. They outscored Washington State in a shootout 41-38. A great victory there against John Mateer in a high-flying offense. Trent Walker's been a very good pass catcher for them. Anthony Hankerson is a phenomenal running back, almost 1,000 yards and 14 touchdowns. On that front, almost 30 points per game Oregon State is allowing. Against the run, they've been brutalized this year. Nevada had 353. They gave up 240 to Oregon, 260 plus to Purdue, and then Air Force had 270, which that's not a great team. They ended up losing that game 28-0. So Oregon State, Nick, they've been pretty bad the 3 weeks leading up to the Washington State game. Showed a lot of life winning that contest. I think they'll keep that momentum rolling against the Boise State team. It's kind of reeling going into the Mountain West title game in 2 weeks. I think 19. Too big. I think they'll come on the road and they'll keep it competitive. Gianti, they'll likely have a big day again. What are your thoughts on this game here? The Broncos, again, just not been great. This is an opportunity to regain some momentum, though, in their own right.
I will congratulate Oregon State on winning the Pac-2 conference by defeating Washington State and winning the conference title in the one matchup between the two of them this year. Kind of funny, claim that they won the Pac-2. Kind of a funny way to look at it. As for Boise State, I like the Broncos' matchup. I like them to win and cover the spread. And I think the main reason why is, like you alluded to there, this Oregon State team's terrible against the run, and now they're facing against, the best running back in the nation, and in my opinion, the Heisman, who should win the Heisman. You can load the box against Gianti all you want. He's still going to absolutely dominate you. He's been putting up unreal numbers. 2,000 yards rushing, 27 touchdowns on 275 carries. He gets his touchdowns over and over again, even in a game against Wyoming, which this Boise State team struggled, right? They struggled on the road in Laramie. They were certainly in danger, potentially losing that game. He still had 169 yards and a touchdown on 19 carries, enough to get the job done for his team at the end of the day. In a game, they were really in a dogfight up there against the Cowboys, so certainly I like this Boise State team to bounce back, be a bit stronger here. Yes, they play a little bit weak as of late. They've not been great. And you could certainly, in my opinion, see the case that Tulane is the better Group of 5 representative right now. I think you can really sit down and make that case. But this Boise State team here, I have them picking up a big win against Oregon State, really putting up a lot of numbers here. I expect Gianti to have a really strong day on the ground, absolute dominant performance from him, which will continue to go a long way in making his case for the Heisman Trophy title. I think Madsen's a good quarterback who's having a solid season, 2,300 yards passing, 19 touchdowns, 3 picks. He's been really good at keeping the ball, protecting it, which I think is a big key. Cam Camper's been solid for this offense as a receiver, 738 and 4 touchdowns. I do like what Oregon State has at sometimes. I think their running back, certainly in Hankerson, is a really good leader, nearly 1,000 yards himself and 14 touchdowns. But this team was bad. They'd lost 4 in a row previously, including a bad shutout loss on the road at Air Force and a 44-7 blowout loss at Cal, and some other tough losses, San Jose State and UNLV on the bounce. Yes, they beat Washington State. Yes, they got some momentum. I just don't trust his defense at all. I think Boise State will run all over them. I think Gianti will have a huge day, maybe 250 plus, something like that. I think he's have a really strong day here. Put up a lot of yards, put up a lot of points. Let this Boise State team roll into the Mountain West title game as they try to continue to punch that ticket to the college football playoff.
Also going down at noon, the MAC title game will be settled. Ohio, they're hosting Ball State as 15-point favorites. If they win that game, that means the winner of Miami of Ohio versus Bowling Green will be playing them next week for the conference crown. This is a Miami, Ohio team that started pretty poor this year, but they also played, a very tough non-conference schedule. While Bowling Green also played an even tougher one, playing a couple of ranked teams. Penn State, Texas A&M, losing those games by only, really a couple points each. Bowling Green this year has been a very underrated team. Connor Blazelak, the former Missouri quarterback, 223 yards per game passing, 15 touchdowns, 4 picks. They have a phenomenal tight end, Harold Fannin Jr. 92 receptions, 1,300 yards, 9 touchdowns. He is as good as it comes. Malcolm Johnson's a nice number 2 for them. While running the ball, Terrion Stewart is a nice veteran running back. Jason Patterson as well. I mean, this is a very fun offense, Nick. I like what they bring to the table overall. In those games earlier on in the year, they lost those by 1 score each. Penn State and Texas A&M on the road, and then in MAC play, they've been splendid. 5 wins in a row coming into this one. Back to Miami of Ohio. This is a team that plays very good defense. 18 points per game allowed. They don't get burned very often on the ground. It's very hard to run the ball. Only blemishes they had were against Notre Dame and Cincinnati. That's fine. In conference play, they've been incredibly dominant. This is a team that doesn't give up a whole lot. Well, they also have a nice quarterback on the other side in Brett Gabbert, 214 yards per game, 18 touchdowns, 8 picks. The run game is stable, with Keon Mosey leading the way. I think this is an interesting game, Nick, potentially one that's going to be lower scoring. I think for Bowling Green, though, this team is just too good. They're only giving up 19.5 points per game in their own right. Some nice players in Anthony Hawkins, Joseph Sipp Jr., Charles Roser as well. I think Bowling Green's going to win this game. I think it's a 2.5, 3-point line. 2-point line right now, 40.5 is the total. I think you'll end up probably hitting the over because that's a very low total. And then 2-point line, I think Bowling Green's going to cover that. It's going to be a close affair for 4 quarters. BGST, Nick, they're heading to the MAC title game. This will be an interesting game. Maybe people don't care about it, but a lot of value here. And it does mean a lot to these players in these programs.
I also like Bowling Green in this one. This is a really interesting matchup in the MAC. 2 key games that will decide who goes to the conference title game. Ohio, as long as they win, they will find themselves in there. They're playing a lowly opponent, which I think they will win that matchup and cover the spread in that one. They have to play Ball State. I think they cover the 14.5 and win that game. Might be a bit of a higher scoring affair. Some snow potential in that game as well, though. I do like Ohio to win that one. As for the game that we're highlighting here, Miami, Ohio, and Bowling Green, the defending champions in the MAC, Miami, Ohio. They've played some tough teams. They've played well. They've won 5 on the bounce, where they looked really good, including blowout wins over Central Michigan and Kent State. They won a gritty affair against NIU most recently to put themselves in this position. And I like Gabbert. He's a good quarterback. Has a bit of a turnover problem at time. 18 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 2,300 yards passing. While Keon Mosey, their running back, has been okay at times, 937 yards, but only 3 rushing touchdowns. I'm all over Bowling Green in this one. I think this Bowling Green team's really good. They gave in. They're a team that they'll punch back at you. You punch them, they'll punch back. They always got a fighting chance. They put up a great fight against Penn State, but a great fight against Texas A&M as well. This is a team that really hits you hard. I like what the defense can do. I've been very impressed. 19.5 points against this year is really solid. They can run the ball pretty effectively, 152 yards per game, 77th in the nation, 225 passing. Blaze Lack's been really good for this team, 2,400 yards passing for him, 15 touchdowns to 4 picks. I like what he's been able to do. His top receiver, Harold Fannin Jr., has been really solid, 1,200 yards receiving, 9 touchdowns for him on 92 grabs. He gets a ton of targets. They can run the ball effectively as well. Terrion Stewart's not a bad back, 856 and 6 touchdowns. I like Bowling Green to win a close one. I think they're going to be, the under will probably hit for me. I like the under in this one. I think Bowling Green will cover by about a point or 2. I'm having a 21-17 score, the under hitting as well. The weather's not going to be phenomenal there. It's going to be cold up there in Bowling Green. Might have some participation as well. I think it's going to be a grind and pound type of game. Just run the ball, run the ball. I like Bowling Green to win the battle running the ball. I think the team's just more effective at running the ball right now. I like the Falcons just want to go to the MAC title game, potentially against the Ohio Bobcats, which could be a really interesting game going down in Detroit in a few weeks.
Harold Fannin Jr. is a game-time decision currently. Certainly hope he can play in this game. I think the line being still favored in their way kind of indicates that he will be getting to go in that contest, though. Look at the mid-afternoon slate. Another one here with conference title implications. Liberty, Sam Houston State. The tiebreakers and whatnot. The scenarios are kind of complicated, but whoever wins this game is going to have a big leg up. And then on Saturday, Jacksonville State, Western Kentucky will finalize the other half of the conference title game. Liberty this year, this team's just not been all that good. I never thought that they were a legit team to be in consideration for the college football playoff. A lot of people felt that they were going to be an obvious choice. The schedule was never that great, though, from the get-go. And this is a team that's lost 2 games. They lost to Kennesaw State. That's Kennesaw State's only win of the year, I'm pretty sure. Jacksonville State, no shame in losing that one, but Caden Salter played terrible. They only put up 21 points. And then just a couple weeks ago at UMass, they only beat them by a point. They were like 18-point favorites. That certainly isn't great. Caden Salter, though, this is a good quarterback, typically, in terms of talent. 180 yards passing, 60% completion rating, 14 touchdowns, 4 picks. It's all about the ground game, though. 266 yards per game. Quentin Cooley, Billy Lucas leading the way on the ground. And, of course, Salter puts up 556 and 6 scores so far this year, going up against a Sam Houston State team that plays very good defense. This is a team that's vastly improved compared to last year, where they were struggling to win games. They're only giving up 20.2 points per game, though. Very good, for the most part, against the ground game. They did play Jacksonville State last week, AO 278. That's a team that loves to run the football. And then early on in the year against UCF, they got exposed as well. So, they've played two similar style attacks already this year, Nick, and they've not been great. So the confidence level in them being able to slow down the run might not be there. Chris Murray, Kevin Gavler, though, in this front seven are going to be the leaders for Sam Houston. They excel at playing these low-scoring contests. Their offense was abysmal last year, much better this year. Passing attack, it's not really there. Hunter Watson plays solid ball. Didn't do much last week, only 84 yards, though. Jay Ducker, the former NIU running back, has been a big player for them. Then Hunter Watson, those guys both have almost 600-plus yards. Combined 14 touchdowns. This is going to be another game that's going to be a low-scoring affair. I think for Liberty, their defense is a little bit worse. I think Sam Houston State's going to play very good at home. I just don't think Liberty's all that good. The record is very deceiving. I'll take the Bearcats to get the job done here at home, Nick. What's that line right now? -3 in favor of Liberty. So I'm going to go ahead and take the under in the Bearcats to be victorious in Huntsville.
I like the under and the Bearcats to be victorious as well. I think this is a very deceiving record at 8-2 for this Liberty team. They beat down a lot of bad teams. Their non-conference is really weak, playing ECU, Campbell, New Mexico State. They were supposed to play App State. That game got canceled. Obviously, a good reason got canceled due to the impacts of the hurricane that damaged that area. So certainly fair there. They also played UMass out of conference in a game they almost lost in overtime against a bad Minutemen team. Liberty, this team just has not lived up to the expectations this year. Their offense has just not been great through the air. 185 passing yards per game for them, 113th in the nation. They can certainly run the ball, right? 267, which is why if you think they're going to win this game, that's probably your reasoning, because we've seen Sam Houston State struggle against the run, and that's certainly the big reason why. If you're going to pick Liberty, 267 per game is certainly a good number. They don't score a ton of points either. 32.2 is not as high scoring as you would hope this offense is. They're also giving up 23.6 points per game, which is a little bit lower than you would hope, or a little higher you hope for this team, ranking 59th in the nation. I think Cooley is a really good running back. He's having a great season, 1,100 yards rushing, 13 touchdowns. Salter's having a good season for this team, 1,800 yards passing, 14 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, but they've looked shaky against UMass, against Western Kentucky. They lost back-to-back games against Kennesaw State and Jacksonville State earlier on this year. I'm not thrilled by Sam Houston. Ducker, I think he's a solid back, 623 and 7 touchdowns. Watson, a below-average quarterback, 1,400 yards passing, 9 touchdowns, 7 picks. Nothing crazy there. The Sam Houston defense, if they're having a good game, I think they're going to certainly win this game. They're going to play well. They've played strong against some of their opponents. The games they have lost, they get gut-punched against the run, which is a problem. This team can run the ball effectively, 195 yards per game, 25th in the nation. They averaging about 23 points per game. They're giving about 20 points per game. I like Sam Houston win a close one. I think the under's in play. I like them to cover this, or win outright, that is. They're plus 30 right now on the money line. I like them to win this game, move on, potentially compete for that conference title. Liberty, though, disappointing. Jamie Caldwell and company got to figure out what's going to be going next for next year, because they really thought they could be that team to get in the Group of 5 spot for the college football playoff. That's not how it worked out. A lot of questions got to be answered for Liberty in the offseason.
Yeah, if I had to guess, he might take a job elsewhere. Looking at the Egg Bowl, Miss State and Ole Miss, complete choke job by the Rebels last week. I had over 9.5 wins, so I appreciate them losing to complete nobodies twice this year, but they beat Georgia. So great job, Kiffin. I don't even know what to say. This line's incredibly big, though. That's one thing I definitely know. 26 in favor of the Rebels. This team's just been so up and down. They put up good numbers against bad opponents, and that might make me think this line's going to be covered by the Rebels, because that's what they've done throughout the year. Jackson Dart, where's the confidence level after throwing 2 pick sixes on the final drive? Or not pick sixes, but game-ending interceptions on the final drive, that is. Still played a pretty good game, and nobody else around him really helped. Lane Kiffin didn't help. The defensive tackle had more carries than any running back on the roster. I don't know, Nick. This is just a complete disaster, because this team is so good, and they should be a lot better. They shouldn't have had more than one loss this year, quite frankly, going up against the Mississippi State team, a team that has not been very good, but since Michael Van Buren took over at quarterback, they've certainly had a little bit more juice to them. They've competed in games throughout the year since his emergence. It's kind of been tough sledding, completing 55%. There's a lot of weight on his shoulders. Hung around against Tennessee, though, only lost by 19 to Missouri this past week. The UMass game, they were trailing that one in the first half. Got blown out against Arkansas, but they hung around against Georgia and A&M. So what makes you think they won't hang around here, considering Kiffin's a complete disaster?
This is an interesting matchup in the Egg Bowl. The Egg Bowl is always a great game. Kind of disappointing it's moved off Thanksgiving to this Friday slate. I think that kind of takes a little bit of the attention off of it. for this matchup. Game day for Mississippi State Bulldogs. This is a team that's not great this year, but Ole Miss, I want to talk about them for a second. I had a bunch of different predictions in the preseason, some bold takes. I said Ole Miss wouldn't make the college football playoff despite spending, 10 plus million on a roster. And a lot of people in the comments didn't like what I said. A lot of people thought I was wrong for that. I said that their offensive line I was worried about. I was also worried about Kiffin's play calling in key situations. And while both of those points were proven right, and this team is not going to college football playoff, I feel pretty vindicated in my opinion. I just did not think this team had enough to get the job done in the end, and I didn't think they'd lose, potentially to Florida or LSU, but I figured they'd lose to somebody along the way and just kind of screw that up, and that's what happened here. They lost to Florida. Jackson Dart really played horrible on that final couple minutes, just throwing all over the place. My dad and I were stunned watching that game. I think he threw into quadruple coverage at one point, at least triple coverage down the field on one of the interceptions. Another one, he just totally misread the defender who absolutely jumped the route and ended the game for Florida. Complete disaster for Dart. He seems to be just uncomfortable and a lot of confusion. This is a big game for Mississippi State, right? This is their Super Bowl. This team is 2-9. They don't have a conference win. This team's terrible. They're really not a good team. They're in a deep rebuild with Levy at the helm, but those fans, they absolutely would love to beat their rival on the other side of the state. This is a very heated rivalry here, and I just think 26 points is way too many points for Ole Miss to lay here. This team's got nothing to play for now. They got no motivation. I feel like Kiffin's just going to have no energy for this game. I expect it to be close. I think it's more likely that it's a one-score game than it is Ole Miss covering the 26 points. I think it's actually a lot more likely that it's a 6-7 point game compared to Ole Miss putting up a 26 point coverage against this team. Yes, Jackson Dart's great, 3,700 yards passing, 24 touchdowns, but 6 picks, including a bunch against Florida. Looking really confused and rattled. Trey Harris is battling injuries. Henry Perry has also been battling injuries. He's had an okay season. I think Michael Van Buren's, the starter of the future of Mississippi State, a guy that they can really start to build around. 600 yards passing, 10 touchdowns of 5 picks. They have a decent running game at time. I think there are upsides for this Mississippi State team. I know they're 2-9, but I'm seeing some things I like for them in the progress in the future. They hung around with A&M. They hung around with Georgia. I think they're going to hang around with Ole Miss, and they'll cover this spread. They'll lose by a touchdown, 10 points, something like that. Am I rolling the dice a little bit there? Certainly, but I like what the state team can do. It's a rivalry. You never know what's going to happen, and especially considering the fact that Ole Miss just doesn't really care anymore. They got nothing to play for. Their season's done. Mississippi State, they would love to beat their rivals to cap off and just kind of round out this season and move in the next direction, move towards next year. I like the Bulldogs to cover the spread here, certainly.
Another game with a pretty lofty number, up to 19.5 now. The Bulldogs hosting Georgia Tech. This is a Georgia Tech team that has not backed down against anyone they played. I picked them to beat Miami. They did that with relative ease. And you had quarterback issues at Georgia Tech and lost that game. Hung around well against Notre Dame in Mercedes-Benz in that one. This is a team I think it's going to be hard to beat them by 20 points. They look at what they do on the ground, though. They love to chew up clock. Haynes King's not really been able to throw the football due to a shoulder injury. So they're opting to run with this 2 QB system. He's still running the ball, though. He's still getting plenty of touches in that regard. Last 2 games, he has a touchdown each. Had 90-plus rushing against Miami. Aaron Philo, the true freshman's taken over. He's been all right as a passer. Had a pretty good game against NC State. Had a lot of drops. Interception wasn't his fault. They really pulled down his numbers, led the game-winning drive where he was able to, end the game with 57 rushing yards and a TD. He scored from like 20 or 30 yards out. So this is an intriguing 2 QB system that they're opting to run with here. Going up against the Georgia team, who just gave up 226 rushing yards to UMass for whatever reason. Dylan Sampson had 100-plus against when they played Tennessee. Had a pretty good game, being able to stay ahead of the sticks. The run defense at times has been shaky for Georgia, Nick. I don't think it's going to be bad enough for them to fold in this contest. I think Georgia Tech with this is a good defense. Kyle Eford's a phenomenal player at linebacker. Jordan Vandenberg at defensive line. Romello Height has been a heck of an addition for them. They got guys like Miles Brooks in the secondary who can make plays. I think Georgia Tech covers this line. I think they're going to be able to sustain some drives and run the ball. Georgia, obviously, with a great D-line, phenomenal linebacking core. I think they're probably going to have a good enough game plan schemed up to potentially just keep them held in check, and that might allow Georgia to run away with this one. Carson Beck finally starting to click, play much better football because his offensive line is giving him time and protection. Last 2 games, he's looked very good. The weapons are finally starting to help out. I think Georgia Tech will cover this line, Nick. I mean, they played much better last year than I anticipated they would going on the road. I think if they can establish long drives running the ball, they'll be able to take the crowd out of this game, and that's going to allow them to cover a near 20-point line.
Is Georgia the most confusing team in college football right now? I think they certainly can be that case. They lost to Alabama, a game they were getting absolutely trashed in the first half. Yes, they came back and made it tight in the end, but they still lost that one in Tuscaloosa. Then at Ole Miss and Oxford, they just had no pulse, got beat by a team that really isn't that good in Ole Miss, a team that ended up choking and missing the playoffs in that one. But then, this Georgia team goes out and they They beat Texas. They put Texas on the road. They smacked Tennessee at home and put themselves in a good position. They just find themselves in the SEC title game, that is, because so many other teams lost around them. They'll be in the college football playoff at 9-2. But they gave 21 points to UMass. Is that something to be concerned about? Yes, they won the game by a boatload, but that same Mississippi State team we just talked about, not a very good Mississippi State team, gave up less points against UMass than Georgia did. Kind of odd. Maybe it's an outlier, but just a weird result there. That UMass team should not have run as much as they did against Georgia and have much success. I think I'm not really understanding where the books are getting 20 points as favorite for Georgia here in this matchup. I think this Georgia Tech team's a good team. This team beat Miami a few weeks ago. This team, when fully healthy with Haynes King and Jamal Haynes, is a really good 1-2 punch. King is a good quarterback, 600 yards passing, 9 touchdowns to 1 pick. Haynes is a really good back, 700 yards, that is, and 9 touchdowns for him. I really do like the balance they have. Beck's been sloppy this year. He's made a lot of mistakes. This Georgia Tech team can certainly capitalize on that. 3,000 yards passing, 23 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. He's been reckless and loose with the ball. This Georgia offense just is not the same that it used to be. The offensive line's a little weak this year. They can't run the ball as effectively. The wide receiving core has a lot of drops. They've been making mistakes. Beck just has not been accurate, been seeing issues. This Tech secondary, I think, is a good unit. I think this unit can certainly capitalize, get a turnover or two. I think Georgia will win the game ultimately probably by a touchdown, maybe 10 points, something like that. But I just cannot see them covering this 20-point spread. Seems way too lofty, even in Athens. I think they're kind of just coasting their way into the SEC title game and college football playoff. Might get caught off guard a little bit by this rushing attack for Georgia Tech that could replicate some of the success that UMass had in that game last week. I like Georgia Tech to cover the spread here, keep it close, but Georgia will get the job done eventually. Move on to the SEC title game where I think they have to be the favorite, even against Texas, a team they beat earlier in the year, or A&M, whoever they play in the conference title game. I like Georgia to win that one as well. The Bulldogs here, they'll get by, they'll survive a scare at home in this one, but certainly keep an eye on this game. This could get out of hand. This could get very close, very interesting, very late in this one. Certainly keep an eye on this one Saturday night.
Yeah, and they also have 2 very good receivers as well. And Eric Singleton, Malik Rutherford, you're going to see a lot of end-around jet sweeps, with QB options on those jet sweeps where they can hand it off or run downhill. And I think they'll have some good success running downhill, and I think they'll be able to establish long drives. So I think this will be an intriguing game, and the Tech will be able to keep it closer than anticipated. Last game we'll discuss here. Interesting rivalry, Iowa and Nebraska, 7:30 p.m. on NBC. 6-point line, 39.5 is the total. I think it's going to hit the under. I think this is going to be a massively defensive contest. It sucks that Iowa blew it against UCLA. That's a blown bet for me because I had the over 8.5 wins on this team. I still think they're a good team. 1,500 yards for Caleb Johnson, 21 touchdowns, going up against the Nebraska team that's been relatively good all year on defense. The Indiana game was a big outlier. Other than that, though, they were good against Ohio State. They were good with being able to force 2 There was 2 turnovers they forced against SC that gave them 14 points. So this is a good defense. They got heat in the middle. Guys like Ty Robinson, Jamari Butler on that D-line is very good. Nash Hutchmacher. Iowa, their defense is not as good as we're accustomed to seeing, but it's still a very good defense. I don't think Raiola's been able to really throttle with his 10 interceptions this year and his inconsistencies. So massive defensive game here, Nick. I think Jackson Stratton might be starting again because the injuries have hampered, and he's the 4th string quarterback and he's had to play this year. So I think this is going to be a relatively low-scoring game, maybe like 13-6, 13-9, something like that. Is that too lofty, or do you think that's what's in store for us? I know probably a lot of people don't care about this game, but this is a rivalry at the end of the day, and there's bragging rights on the line.
I have a low-scoring game as well. I have a 20-13 win for Iowa. This is the type of game that Iowa loves. The weather's going to be brutal out there at Kinnick in Iowa City. Kickoff temperatures around 20 degrees, maybe even lower than that. Wind is going to be gusting all night, looking at potentially 10-mile-per-hour winds, getting around 13 degrees. The real feel is going to be in the single digits. This is the type of contest that Iowa thrives in. They love these gritty type of tough defensive battles. This is what this team's built for, and I don't think Nebraska is going to be ready to compete in this matchup. It's going to be still a really good crowd showing despite the temperature. This is a really good defense that Iowa has, even if they've shown a little bit of weaknesses at time this year. 17.7 points given up per game, a little bit higher than usual, 12th in the nation in that regard. Still, top 15 unit. They've been able to run the ball effectively, which has been really a big key for them. 213 yards per game. Caleb Johnson's been phenomenal. 1,500 yards rushing, 21 touchdowns. He's having an incredible season. I expect him to get at least 1 touchdown here. We've seen Nebraska play some low-scoring games as well during this season. This Iowa team, though, their defense is going to capitalize, and they're going to force Raiola to a turnover or 2. Raiola, I don't think he's having a terrible season considering he's a true freshman, but some people are disappointed. 2,400 yards passing, 12 touchdowns, 10 picks. I expect him to throw an interception or 2 in this one to keep it, keep Iowa able to get the ball, good field position, a lot of punts probably in this one as well. I like Iowa to grind this one out, get the win in this rivalry, get to 8 wins. Another nice season for Iowa if they get to 8 wins. That's an impressive number. Nebraska, there's some question marks about Matt Rule. I don't think that's necessary right now. This team's going to go to a bowl game. They end up getting the job done at the end of the day. I don't think they're going to win this one. I just can't see them winning this one right now. It's going to be close. It's going to be a battle. The frigid temperatures. Just run the ball over and over again. Iowa's just going to run the ball a ton in this one. Probably going to put up a lot of yards on the ground. Get the job done, get the win, move on to a bowl game, and see what they can do in the postseason play for both programs. They try to get a nice bowl win to cap off a long season, a rivalry game of sorts here, but I'll take the Hawkeyes in this one.
Yeah, they finally broke the curse of not being able to make a bowl game. It was like a 7-year stretch, probably more than that. Finally going to a bowl game. This should be a good game, though, if you want to see defense at night. Like you said, the weather's going to be awful. Looking at right here, 18 degrees, 10-mile-per-hour wind, might even surge more than that. So, it's Big Ten football. I think that's something that we can all appreciate. And, other than the Georgia game, nothing else is really going on at night. UCF and Utah, nobody cares. So that's going to be, that's going to be it for today's episode, Nick. As always, appreciate you joining me. And, this is a slate we're looking forward to all the way back in August. Like the Egg Bowl, being able to watch Colorado and their talent. We never knew that games like Bowling Green and Sam Houston and those conferences would be so meaningful as well. And then seeing the Georgia game get moved to a Friday night. This is a great slate for football and Thanksgiving weekend. I'm very excited it's finally here. And, I think we're incredibly grateful that they put these Friday night games on, because we wouldn't typically catch these on a Saturday. So rivalry weekend, getting some extra exposure here in college football.
Yeah, I certainly like moving some of these games around. Key games in the MAC conference and the noon slate, 2 games that will decide who goes to the conference title game. Important games to watch. Boise State trying to push towards the college football playoff. Certainly worth watching. Ashton Janty. While Colorado's a fascinating team as well. You get a cool game in Sam Houston State Liberty. The Egg Bowl, I think, is always worth a watch. One of the best rivalries in college football. I hope they move back to Thanksgiving in the future. But right now, putting on Friday is fine with me as well. That's going to be a fun matchup. Then I think UGA Georgia Tech's a very close game. And then you got Big Ten gritty football in a freezing cold Kinnick Stadium in Iowa. That place is still going to be packed out. Those fans are going to show up. I think this is a good slate across the board. Some other games in there that we didn't mention that are solid as well. So there's certainly a lot to keep an eye on over this holiday weekend. Navy, East Carolina is a game that's kind of interesting to some people. ECU are favorites in that one. Utah, UCF going down later in the day could be interesting. San Jose State are favorites over Stanford at home. Could be a game to look at. Maybe Stanford sneaks out an upset there. Maybe San Jose State runs away with that one. A solid slate across the board. Some really good football going on Black Friday.
Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.